Sup, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. I am pretty open about my love for art. It's hard not to sit down and watch a couple hours of Bob Ross painting happy trees before you're sitting back thinking to yourself, you know what? I could probably do that. But seriously, I actually had somebody tell me they didn't know who Bob Ross was. If you don't know who he is, go check him out. The dude is the GOAT. One time they had him paint mountains, and it was so good they replaced the mountains with the painting because he did it so fast, they called it Rushmore. But if art were easy, it'd be called Monday. And speaking of Monday, tomorrow's Tuesday, and that sees the release of Concrete Genie on PS4 by Pixel Opus. Concrete Genie is a third-person action light title, with you taking on the role of a young street kid befriended by neon genies who are out to save a city using magic and enough color to make an LSD trip look boring in comparison. Thanks to Sony for supplying early review code for this, and as you guys know, even if I get review code, I buy a copy, so my cash is on the line just like yours. If you like the video, maybe give it a thumbs up, maybe subscribe, or go out there and find yourself somebody that you've been watching their stuff and haven't done that, and do it now. So here's my review for Concrete Genie. Getting your neon Bob Ross on, a very flexible meaning for the word masterpiece, and introducing the world to sloppy Bob Mathingamajig, my very first and favorite genie. Graphics are up first. So Concrete Genie does something I feel that many games try to do but don't actually hit the mark on, and that's mixing the graphical stylings of its presentation directly into the gameplay itself, and never really lose sight of that throughout the entire title, driving home the realization that the artwork you're creating is improving the world and your character's life as you improve actually making it. Also, it's the first game in a year, maybe the first game in a couple years, to make me actually say, damn, out loud a couple times. When you first start doing the art, you're surrounded in this bleak depression burg of Denska, that's the town, blighted out for years after an oil tanker crashed near it, killing the wildlife in the ocean, and sinking the town into a depression both emotionally as well as financially. There is such an amazing atmosphere of bleakness here. Each section of the town is sunk and off kilter from the rest, and while small in comparison to larger titles for sure, its separation of areas like the port to the lighthouses is done well enough to make you feel like it's a little larger than its actual footprint is. Now, graphically, though, where the game shines is, of course, the paintings. This is something you've seen in the trailers. Outfitted with a magical paintbrush, the main character can paint onto most 2D surfaces from a smattering of designs that you pick up along the way, like a mystical tattoo artist learning from others, inking the land one wall at a time. Each section you can draw is based on a particular theme, like subterranean with glowing mushrooms to forested areas with dandelions and tree trunks for the genies to sit on as you unlock them as you move forward. The connection between the ecological disaster that ruined the town and its never-ending push for industrial and financial solvency is actually not lost on me, but it's the subtle way in which you interact with it that's really incredible here. Almost everything you paint animates as well, from tulips flowering to rain coming down if you paint clouds to lightning striking, plants shifting in the wind, everything. Paint butterflies and they magically move across the creases of the building in this strange mystical way that actually connects all four sides of the building into this eternal moving painting. And I gotta say, in a stroke of genius, as well as the animation itself, it's not just you painting, but the painting coming to life when you stop. So for example, you draw a branch of a tree, then maybe another, and then the tree actually comes to life, growing out from there and flowering. And each painting that you paint also lights up not only the wall you're painting on, but sometimes the locations themselves, with the grass and the world slowly gaining life and color from your artwork as the magic returns to the city. But the game's namesake is absolutely where it's at, the genies. Mystical creatures that are one half Tron Lightwork and one half Black Velvet painting. They come to life with excellent animations, puzzled by a location you can't get to one moment and then drawing you to something of interest the next, or playfully smiling and sort of bebopping around near some game world item they want you to play with. It is unbelievable how cool they are, and your ability to slightly customize them draws parallels, I think, with other games and their desire to have you emotionally bond with, let's say, a dog or another animal, but it's not forced here. You created it. Your three-horned monstrosity may be ugly to everyone else, but just like a mother's love, ours is blind. But you'd have to be to not notice the emotion and just the overall spirit of all these creations. We celebrate game art a great deal, as we should, as the technical and artistic prowess behind some of the creations since the day gaming started have really been awe-inspiring, but many times they get lost in the minutiae of frames per second and pixels per square inch, and ignores one of the greatest measures of gaming, which in Concrete Genie could just be labeled art per acre. It is downright gorgeous. The first time a genie peeks around a corner and tries to sneak up and surprise you, it's this awe-inspiring moment where you think to yourself, oh, I get it. For For the rest of the world itself, I would say texture work and effects-wise, the game is fine, with everything having an even level of detail and nothing being too drab in comparison to your own creations, and I did like the town and its various sections. The game also has a VR experience mode, which is a small series of missions to basically learn the ropes, and then a free 3D and 2D painting canvas. This is one place where the game doesn't exactly entice, especially since the 3D areas start to quickly remove items you've painted, most likely to save FPS if you paint too many. So if you paint 100 apples, expect to see the first ones you painted start to disappear. Also, the resolution of the PSVR doesn't really do this game any favors. Also, Concrete Genie stumbles just a bit in the animations, especially for painting itself, which looks a little haphazard, and moving side to side in particular. It's a wickerwork dance of feet whenever the character shifts in place, like an old cartoon where nothing but dust and swirls are near a character's getaway sticks. Now, when it comes to performance, the game rarely ever bumbles, and in fact, at 4K, it looks stunning, from excellent muted lighting during some of the darker moments to the colorful way the art interplays with the real world the next. Sadly, the game has no HDR support, and while it may come later, I think this is a sad omission for a game almost screaming for that feature. It still looks nice without it, but it certainly could have used it. You know, here's the thing though, stumbles aside, Concrete Genie's phenomenal looking, and while much of that is the art you draw and the mystical beings that you create, and maybe not always the world around you, it's hard to look at it and not be stunned for such a small team to have done this. And sure, it may not be able to keep up with the vast, almost Pixar-like quality of, say, Ratchet and Clank, but it heads out into battle with enough spirit and charm that it's hard not to give it at least even odds against some other titles. And that brings us to sound, music, and voice.
Put you in there. Fish around here, but let's see. Yes. Whoa, sorry, Krabby.
And this time we'll do music first. So while at times almost deceptively simple, I think the music here works. There are times where you will realize that one entire section is really based around a flute playing a melody, then a violin, then the next section is them merging and splitting off again. But as you progress, things get decidedly more interesting, with a stance that less is more many times. Exploring is partnered up with nothing but the plucking of a harp in the background, but it's when painting masterpieces, which are basically end-level paintings where you pick up a large number of audio stingers that play as you build upon not only your own ideas of what to paint, but those that the genies want as well, and it really works. If you like your bigger, more orchestral pieces, cutscenes and ending scenes are far more full, and this works to bookend the levels, which are more about the sounds and the interactions with the genies. This does change up a bit halfway through the game, as much of it does. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Overall, I'd say, pretty good music. That brings us to voice. So this is fine, it's very lean, be aware that you only have the main character himself, the genies speak of the creatures you paint, and a few others, mostly kids that are your main nemesis throughout a particular part of the game. They throw verbal insults your way, or when collect amongst themselves, vandalizing the city or playing various games, you can hear them do a good job of sort of just being kids with dumb one-liners and ribbing that most of us all got in high school. And what I think is a smart play on utilizing what they actually have most of the emotion coming from the genies themselves. And that brings us to sound. So this is pretty good, especially the ambient moments, the water dripping off gutters in the decrepit part of towns, and actually, who am I kidding? All of the places decrepit. But the sounds work to concentrate the experience and make each location, of which there are only a handful, feel pretty different from one another. Sonically, the city has a nice open air to it, while the later subterranean parts are sort of awash with suitable effects to make you think there's a very good chance of needing a tetanus shot after exploring them. Also, there are areas where there's a number of subtle cues as to what's going on around you that are easy to miss, but you'll probably pick up on them subconsciously. They're the sounds of the genies unable to progress, or one picking up flowers you've drawn on a beat-up port building's wall somewhere. Very well done, even if, again, it does appear to be a little bit lean at first. And that brings us to gameplay and a bit about the story. You play as Ash, living in the small town of Denska. Ruined from an ecological disaster, you quickly run afoul of the main antagonist of the game, which is a group of bullies who kick you around and steal your stuff and can also damage the art you place down. If this kid had a season for the part of his life, somehow it got stuck on winter and then put on constant loop. As you begin to travel the world and learn about what's happened prior to the game starting, you discover a magical paintbrush that can not only draw graffiti on the wall, but also basically bring it somewhat back to life. And as a side bonus, create those magical creatures that can interact with the game world around you. For example, if you need to open a gate, you can find a specific spot to create an electrical genie who can then electrify the panel. Drawing the genies is awesome. First, you pick the kind, which is usually sort of set for you, and then you draw their body type as well as adding things like tails and horns and all kinds of weird designs onto them. When you're happy, you bring the genie to life, and this is easily the best part of the game and stunningly well done. Seeing the art come alive and start to move around is just phenomenal. Each genie has a particular feeling to them and almost an emotional resonance for them. You then work together to relight the city using your brush to paint walls and items and then bring power back to the world. And when you can't pass something in the game world, you then summon the genies to help you figure out what is there. And I think a lot like games of this type, it is pretty simple, and especially in the first half, it's mostly just platforming, finding collectibles in the form of more genie parts and the genies themselves, as well as learning about the world and doing some puzzles. It's always introducing something, new designs, new genies, new locations, having them work in tandem, new puzzles, or a new story element. There are a couple issues, and first is the VR doesn't really feel much at all like there's anything there compared to the rest of the game, and I didn't really expect to trudge around the city magic paintbrush in hand like some kind of version of Mickey Mouse and Fantasia, but I did expect it to be more than really an extended tutorial and just some odds and ends. There isn't as much there as I expected. Secondly, you can paint a couple ways. I settled on using the sensor on the PS4 controller to paint, and it worked well enough. It's not bad, just not exactly as precise as I would have liked, especially as I continue to want to get better and better at my creations. And I get it, many of us have all the artistic ability of walking into a Lowe's and kicking the shit out of the entire paint department and just hoping it doesn't look like Jackson Pollock exploded. And I admit, I'm not much better. So I can't really say that with more detailed control, I would have been suddenly selling my creations on eBay or something, but I would have liked that to just be a little tighter. Also, I wish the puzzles had been a bit more complex, with more than one way to get past them, as they're notably easy. It is an experience game. We've seen other games like this, but that would have been a great aside. Taking all that into account, though, it's really hard for me to dislike almost anything about Concrete Genie, because despite a couple weaknesses, it elevates above them. And in many ways, it owes a great deal to titles like Limbo, but replacing that muted color scheme of that game or Little Nightmares with this exploding tapestry of design and color, and moves away from the escape at all odds kind of feel of those titles with a resounding I am fixing the issues here kind of mentality. And there's a magic there that this absolutely hits. If you do die, and you can die in a couple ways, you start back shortly prior to your death. As a package, Concrete Genie doesn't look like a game that's super deep, and it really isn't, at least in its length or overall breadth. But I found myself spending hours on the depth of it, on a wall painting, just over and over again, trying to get it just right, or actually paying attention to the cutscenes as the game's worldview altered about halfway through and thinking to myself, you know what, that's an interesting way to handle things. I sort of wasn't expecting this. When it comes to length, the game's going to run you maybe 6 to 8 hours, and then you have the VR mode. You also have a free painting mode, which I spent at least another 3 or 4 hours in right there, trying to make something that didn't look like a bunch of paint had just been splattered on the wall. Not 100% sure I was successful, but I sure did try a lot. And that brings us to fun factor. Concrete Genie is, I think, half experience game, half platformer, and for me, just full awesome. I adored my time with this game. Few and far in between are the games that make others sit up and take notice with their design, and especially because while it does look good, it's not as eye-wateringly awesome as something like The Blind Forest or some other title. Concrete Genie mixes whimsical style with an interesting story, and while not replete with gameplay experiences at all, the game aims to have the entire thing be an experience, and for me, it actually was. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touch it again rating system, with rent being replaced by deep sale on PC. I like an artful game like this, and this one in particular I absolutely loved. I think it's well worth getting right away if you're into this style of game. If you're not, it may not magically change your opinion of it, but I would certainly watch a trailer or two to see those genies come to life, because it's pretty awesome. It's not the longest. It does have collectibles. It has that VR mode, though, to me, probably wasn't something I'll jump into. However, it does have the free paint mode, which I absolutely will. And from the sound of it, the designer is adding more function as we move later on. Overall, absolutely an enjoyable experience and one I will return to, even though it's over. And thanks again to Sony once again for the code. So that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. I love doing them. I appreciate you guys watching. It's been an absolute blast being here on YouTube and giving you guys videos. If you guys get a chance, thumbs it up. If you didn't like it, thumbs it down. You can find all my social media in the descriptions. I'd love for you to follow me on Twitter. Maybe check out the podcast on Anchor or on iTunes or Spotify. Of course, you can become a patron. Patron's awesome. And of course, you get to join probably one of the best Discords ever created by man. I'll just go out there and say, easily the best Discord ever created by man, ever. It doesn't matter. Nobody's is better. I'm just joking. There's probably somebody who's is better. But ours is awesome. And I'd love to see you there. Peace out and enjoy the rest of your week.